Good afternoon, everyone. Yesterday we have finished with the topic that is hematinics, and today we are going to start with the new topic that is coagulants and the anticoagulants. Okay, so what are coagulants? Coagulants are the ones that promote the coagulation process, the blood coagulation process, and the anticoagulants, they have the exact opposite action, that is they prevent coagulation from happening. Okay, so in which condition we require coagulants and in which conditions we require anticoagulants, that is important. And also the mechanism by which the coagulants they promote coagulation and the mechanisms by which the anticoagulants they cause or they prevent blood from clotting is important. Okay, so that will be our focus, and that's what we are going to study in this particular topic. Okay, so first we'll start with the coagulants. So coagulants are the agents that help in coagulation of blood and are given in hemorrhagic conditions. So which are hemorrhagic conditions that comes in our mind when we talk about this? The main hemorrhagic condition is the hemophilia. Okay, so we have already studied about hemophilia. So in hemophilia there is a deficiency of certain coagulation factors, because of which there are cases of hemorrhage. Okay, so in these conditions the coagulants they are very important. And also in condition where there is a accidents. Okay, so in accidents there is a hemorrhage. Also during surgeries there is a hemorrhage. So to prevent that or to minimize that, we use the coagulants. Okay, so what are these coagulants? These are the elements or factors which are required for coagulation. They are found in the fresh whole blood or plasma and are therefore indicated in case of deficiency of any clotting factor. Like in case of hemophilia, there is a deficiency of factor 8, there is deficiency of factor 9. So in those conditions we give the this particular coagulation factors. Okay, why we give, we extract these coagulation factors and we give it to compensate the deficiencies that is there in that particular patients. Okay, so blood coagulation is an important biochemical reaction which ensures the cessation of blood loss from the damaged blood vessel. So we know this. So coagulation is an important part of the hemostatic mechanism. Disorders of blood coagulation, they result in excessive hemorrhage and or thrombosis and embolism. Okay, so why we need to use them? Because they can cause these three conditions, that is either they can cause the excessive hemorrhage, or they can cause the thrombosis, or they can cause the embolism. Anything out of it, it is fatal to the human. Okay, so classification. So following are the drugs which are used to restore hemostasis. So these drugs are very commonly used, and out of which the very important drug as a coagulant is the vitamin K. Some of these drugs from the miscellaneous category we will be studying in other parts. Okay, so like this one, this fibrinogen or anti-hemophilic factor. Okay, so in vitamin K we have two, that is the first, that is K1, which is obtained from the plants and it is fat soluble, and the example is phytonadione, okay, or phylloquinone. Okay, then we have K3, which is a synthetic preparation which we can have as the fat soluble and water soluble. So the fat soluble is the example is menadione and the acetomenaphthone. Okay, sorry for that pronunciation, that was wrong from my side. Okay, so water soluble, we have menadione sodium bisulfite and menadione sodium diphosphate. Okay, so miscellaneous, we have fibrinogen, which is obtained from human source. Then we have anti-hemophilic factor, that is the factor 8. Then we have desmopressin. Then we have adrenochrome monosemicarbazole. Then we have brutin. Then we have ethamycilate. Okay, so we will study about vitamin K in detail, and others we will just take overlook. Okay, so vitamin K, it takes part in blood coagulation reaction and therefore is indicated in treatment of hemorrhage. So how this vitamin K plays part in blood coagulation, that we will cover under its mechanism of action. So the whole blood or plasma is best for immediate effect, as it provides all the endogenous coagulation factors along with plasma volume replenishment. Okay, so the vitamin K is a fat soluble vitamin which takes part in the synthesis of the clotting factors. Okay, so understand this, the best way to prevent the hemorrhage or immediate relief is given by infusing the that particular blood or plasma. Okay, which achieves both things, that is, it replenishes the plasma volume as well as it provides the necessary coagulation factors. But vitamin K is also useful in these hemorrhagic conditions, not emergency situations, but in regular hemorrhagic conditions, that as it helps in the synthesis of the clotting factors. Okay, so which clotting factors it helps in synthesis, that we'll see in next. So the sources from where we can get this vitamin K: from the green leafy vegetables, then liver, cheese, butter, egg yolk. These are the good sources of vitamin K. So next, mechanism of action. So vitamin K is required for synthesis of various factors, that is factor 2, factor 7, factor 9 and factor 10. Okay, so these all factors, they take part in the blood coagulation reaction. So chemically these factors, they are the glycoproteins, and with a number, that is 10 or 11, or gamma carboxyglutamic acid at the amino terminal of the peptide chains. Okay, so that was its structure of these factors. Then vitamin K, what it does, it regulates the synthesis of these gamma carboxyglutamic acid residues. It occurs after peptide chain synthesis. Okay, so what it does, it regulates synthesis of these residues, that is gamma carboxyglutamic acid residues. So you can see in the reaction which is given over here. So the factor 2, then 7, then 9 and 10, they are in their decarboxylated form. So their gamma carboxylation, it is done in presence of vitamin K. Okay, so vitamin K, it is in hydroquinone form or the reduced form. So it causes its carboxylation when it gets converted to vitamin K, which is an epoxide form or the oxidized form. So this reducing conversion of vitamin K happens from the reduced form to the oxidized form, and thereby it is causing the gamma carboxylation of all of these factors. Okay, so in the carboxylation reaction, the vitamin K acts as cofactor. Okay, so if the vitamin K is not there, then this gamma carboxylation of these factors, it won't happen, and as it won't happen, they won't be activated and they won't function as the coagulation factors. So the therapeutic uses, in which conditions we have to use the vitamin K. So in prolonged antimicrobial therapy. So what is correlation of this prolonged antimicrobial therapy and the vitamin K therapy? What these antimicrobials do, that we will study. Okay, so these antimicrobial therapy or the antibiotics per se, when we use for the long period, they cause destruction of GIT bacteria. So where in GIT these bacteria reside? They reside in the large intestine. Okay, and one of the function you have studied of this bacteria is that they synthesize the vitamin K. Okay, so as they get killed because of use of these antibiotics for prolonged duration of time, formation of vitamin K is either reduced or it is completely stopped. So it creates the acute deficiency of this vitamin K. So as vitamin K deficiency occurs, there is no source from inside that can synthesize the vitamin K. That's why we have to give the vitamin K from the external source. Okay, so in the treatment of this condition, we have to give the vitamin K preparations by oral route. Okay, then second we have, that is obstructive jaundice. So obstructive jaundice, we have already studied about it, that it happens due to obstruction to the flow of bile. Okay, and thus this affects the liver also. Okay, so what happens? It is caused by the malabsorption of dietary or the intestinal vitamin K. Okay, so as there is a problem in the absorption of the dietary means whatever food we consume, through that also we get some amounts of the vitamin K. So if we are not able to absorb that dietary vitamin K, then it will create the deficiency of vitamin K. And also, if the whatever intestinal vitamin K is being produced, if we are not able to absorb it, then also it leads to the vitamin K deficiency. Okay, so in this condition we can administer vitamin K3 by oral route, while the K1 and K2 forms of it, they can be given through the parenteral route. Okay, then we have overdosage of oral anticoagulants. Okay, in next topic, that is anticoagulants, we will be studying about this very thoroughly, so you will be able to correlate that why these oral anticoagulants when given in overdoses can cause this vitamin K deficiency or inactivity of vitamin K. Okay, so in this case the vitamin K is given as specific antidote, so it is like a toxicity of the oral anticoagulants. Okay, and to nullify that toxicant or that toxin, we are giving vitamin K as an antidote. Okay, vitamin K1 is the preparation of choice due to its rapid onset of action. The menadiol sodium diphosphate, that is K3, it should not be used due to its late onset of action. Okay, so K1 is the preferred, K3 is not. Okay, then we have malabsorption syndrome. In this condition, the parenteral vitamin K or oral vitamin K3 may be used. Okay, so next is adverse effects. Adverse effects are very rare in oral administration. However, in some patients, serious anaphylactoid reactions may occur after IV administration. So I guess you must have studied about this anaphylaxis reaction in, I guess, microbiology, the types of hypersensitivity reactions. So the type 1 reaction is the anaphylaxis reaction, and that is observed in case of parenteral vitamin K administration. So large doses of synthetic menadione may cause hemolytic anemia, then it can cause hyperbilirubinemia and the kernicterus in the newborns, mainly in premature infants. Okay. So next, other drugs. So other drugs which are mentioned in the classification under miscellaneous category that we will study, but only the brief introduction to this. So we have the fibrinogen. So it is soluble component of human plasma. Kindly remember the coagulation process. We have had this as the starting material for it. So on addition of the thrombin, it transforms to fibrin. So what it does, it regulates hemorrhage, which is related to low blood fibrinogen concentration in fibrinogenemia or the hypofibrinogenemia. Okay, so the plasma or cryoprecipitate is used in the treatment of this. Okay, it is also used in disseminated intravascular coagulation, that is defibrillation syndrome. Okay, so next drug, that is the anti-hemophilic factor. So what it is a sterile freeze-dried powder which has the factor 8 fraction, which is obtained from the human plasma from whole blood donors. Okay, so by fractionation of the human plasma, we extract this factor 8, and this factor 8 is given to the patient who has deficiency of it. Okay, so it is used in patients of hemophilia, which is a genetic disorder of factor 8 deficiency and who are susceptible to bleeding. So hemophilia type A. Hemophilia type B, it is also known as Christmas disease, as it shows the deficiency of factor 9. Okay, so next drug we have, that is epsilon aminocaproic acid. So about this particular drug we will be studying in detail in the next chapter, that is the fibrinolytic agents. Okay, so this one is the antifibrinolytic. So antifibrinolytic means it prevents lysis of the fibrin thread. Okay, so it is exactly, its mechanism of action is exactly opposite to that of the drugs which we will be studying next, that is fibrinolytic. Those drugs, they cause lysis of the fibrin thread, and this drug, it prevents lysis of the fibrin thread. Okay, and by uh, inhibiting the lysis of the fibrin thread, it keeps that clot intact. Okay, so these drugs, they act by preventing activation of plasminogen and the plasmin to a smaller degree. Okay, so this epsilon aminocaproic acid, it prevents the lysis of existing clot and results in thrombosis. So it is used in hemorrhage with extreme fibrinolysis, such as in overdose of the drug, that is streptokinase, urokinase and the altiplase. So all of these three drugs we will be studying in detail in next chapter, that is fibrinolytics. So it is clinically used in treatment of hemorrhagic conditions which occur due to some surgery or obstetric complications, that is complication that happen or that occur during the delivery of a newborn. So especially in patients of menorrhagia or hematuria in neoplasms like metastatic carcinoma of prostate and leukemia. Okay, so initially 5 grams of the oral dose is given, followed by 1 gram hourly to a maximum of 25 to 30 gram in 24 hours until bleeding stops. So this is its dose. So the next drug that we have, it is thrombin. Okay, thrombin is an enzyme, and the formation of thrombin is the end result of the intrinsic pathway and the extrinsic pathway. So this is an enzymatic preparation, and what it does, it changes fibrinogen to the fibrin. Okay, a solution of human or bovine thrombin is used locally as hemostatic agent. So topically it controls hemorrhage from the puncture sites or the capillary oozing during the surgery. Okay, so next we have that is fibrin foam. It is extracted, dried, and artificial foam which is formulated in the form of strips cut in any size and used for local hemostasis. It is used in surgery along with the thrombin. Fibrin foam dipped in thrombin is kept at bleeding site, and it can be left in place as clotting material of human origin. Okay. So next we have the snake venom. The venom of Russell's viper and the copperhead snake is used as coagulant. The venom increases coagulation by activating thrombokinase, and it can be used systematically or the locally. Okay. So we have next that is oxidized cellulose, that is the Oxycell. It is a dry absorbable surgical gauze. It is used in hemostasis and helps in clotting by reaction between hemoglobin and cellulosic acid. So if used on bleeding surface, it swells to form a gelatinous mass which gets absorbed in 2 to 7 days. When hemostasis occurs, it should be removed. It should be used in moderate bleeding where suturing or ligation is impractical. Okay, so only in certain cases we have to go for this Oxycell. Next we have the anticoagulants. So these are the agents that decrease the coagulation ability of the blood. So it is acting exactly opposite to that of the coagulants. So these drugs, they do not dissolve already formed clots, but they are used to inhibit the further formation of clots. So the example of these agents, they are the heparin and the warfarin. So these are the main agents. So the heparin, it is given intravenously and at the risk of thrombus formation, and warfarin is administered orally. So there is a basic difference between these two drugs, heparin by IV route and the warfarin is by oral route. Okay, so the classification of these drugs are used to decrease blood coagulability coagulability, and they are classified as follows. That is, the first one, that is injectable anticoagulants, in which we have the heparin, ancrod, and lepiridine. Then we have oral anticoagulants, in which we have two categories. That is, first one is coumarin derivatives and second one is indandione derivative. Okay, so in coumarin derivatives we have bis hydroxycoumarin, that is dicumarol. We have warfarin sodium, we have acinocoumarin, and we have ethyl biscumacetate. Okay, so indandione derivative we have phenandione in that. In injectable anticoagulants, there are more injectable anticoagulant examples are there. For more examples, you can refer to the book, that is Satoskar and Bhandarkar. Okay. So first of all, we will see the injectable anticoagulant, and the prototype is the heparin. So heparin is a strong anticoagulant agent which is naturally found in human blood cells, mainly in the basophils or the mast cells. Okay, so it is synthesized in liver and lungs of domestic animals. It is synthetically available as heparin sodium and the low and high molecular weight heparin. So it is LMWH, that is low molecular weight heparin, and high molecular weight heparin, that is HMWH. Okay, so these are the fractionated heparins. So the potent organic acid they are, and they are commercially obtained from bovine lung and porcine intestinal mucosa. So the mechanism of action very important. So where these heparins act and where they exactly the cause or effect as the anticoagulants. Okay, so you can see we have the normal coagulation cascade, that is the intrinsic pathway is shown as well as the extrinsic pathway is shown, and in between these particular heparins they act. Okay, so they bind and potentiate the activity of plasma antithrombin 3, which forms stable complexes with the activated clotting factors, that is factor 10, factor 2, factor 9, factor 11, factor 12 and factor 13. And by forming the complexes with all of these factors, they prevent their further action. Okay, so what is their further action is the conversion of prothrombin to the thrombin. So if thrombin doesn't get formed, and if you can see the thrombin is nothing but the activated factor 2. So as it forms complex with all of this, that is this factor 10, then factor 9, factor 11, then we have the factor this factor 2. So all of these factor, also this one, that is factor 13, all of these factors they are complexed with the heparins, and as they are complex with their heparins, whatever function they play, it is not going to happen. Okay, so in this case, this factor 11, as it is complex with heparin, there won't be further activation of factor 9. As this factor 9 is complex with the heparin, there is no further activation of factor 10. As this factor 10 is complexed, there is no further activation of prothrombin to thrombin. As this thrombin is complexed with the heparin, there is no further conversion of fibrinogen to the fibrin thread. Okay, so it is like this. The heparins they act as anticoagulants. So in low concentration, heparin selectively prevents conversion of prothrombin to the thrombin. So this main step is inhibited in low concentration. So hence heparin inhibits thrombus formation, however it does not have thrombolytic action. Okay, so it has antiplatelet action in high dose, and hence it increases the bleeding time. Okay, so it decreases the blood lipid level by releasing lipoprotein lipase from vessel wall and the tissues. Okay, so the pharmacokinetics, the heparin is given parenterally through intravenous or subcutaneous route because it is absorbed orally. Okay, so the parenteral administration through in intravenous and the subcutaneous, it does not cross the placenta, so we can use in case of pregnancy. Okay, then it is metabolized in liver and follows the first order kinetics. Okay, so the IV injection of less than 100 units per kilogram has half-life of average 1 hour, but beyond this dose it becomes dose dependent and half-life increases to 5 hours. So the half-life also increases in patients with hepatic cirrhosis and decreases with patients with pulmonary embolism. Okay, so therapeutic uses is an anticoagulant and is used in treatment of various pathological conditions like unstable angina, then dialysis, then pulmonary embolism, then arterial or venous thrombosis, and the angioplasty. Okay, so in this condition we have to go for this particular preparation. So adverse effects, the heparin shows allergic reaction and with fever, urticaria and anaphylactic shock. The reason is quite clear, because we obtain it from the animal sources, and when we obtain any drug from the animal sources, they cause the anaphylactic reactions. Okay, so same you will learn under the antibiotics, that antibiotics, most antibiotics, they suffer from this particular adverse reaction, that is causing the allergic reactions. Okay, so the transient and mild thrombocytopenia, it may occur in 2 to 5% patient because of heparin induced platelet aggregation. So after 7 to 14 days, severe thrombocytopenia is seen because of formation of heparin dependent platelet antibodies. Okay, what is thrombocytopenia? It is decreased levels of thrombocytes, that is platelets in the blood. Okay, so this condition is recovered by replacing heparin with the oral anticoagulants. So prolonged therapy with the this heparin anticoagulants, it is not preferred because it causes the thrombocytopenia. So for some period we use the heparins, but later on we replace these heparins with the oral anticoagulants. So the hemorrhage may occur, which can be inhibited through administration of minimum effective dose by monitoring a PTT. Okay, so it is we have the BTCT test. So we have one factor or one test which actually monitors its effect, heparin's effect on the blood. Okay, so the heparin is used for 6 months or more. It causes hair loss, then transient alopecia and the osteoporosis. Okay, osteoporosis is the condition in which the bones, they become porous in nature, they become brittle, easily breakable. Okay, so other formulation, that is LMWH, that is low molecular weight heparin. So the low molecular weight heparin is used as an anticoagulant in thrombosis and prophylactic condition which cause high danger of thrombosis. So the LMWH, they have average molecular weight of less than 8,000 Daltons. Okay, they contain short chains of polysaccharide, and 60% of all chains are having molecular weight less than 8,000 Daltons. LMWH are also known as the heparin salts. They are formed by using various methods such as fractionation or depolymerization of the polymeric heparin. Okay, so the original heparin sodium, from which we can obtain this particular LMWH. Okay, so they possess a potency of greater than 70 units per milligram of anti-factor 10 active, which is activated factor 10, and a ratio of anti-factor activated factor 10 activity to antithrombin activity of greater than 1.5. Okay, so this LMWH, they have following characteristic feature over heparin. So they have higher bioavailability on subcutaneous administration when compared with heparin. They have longer half-life. They are less bound to the plasma proteins. They do not require frequent monitoring of the partial thromboplastin time, that is PTT. Then they undergo weaker interaction with the platelets, so very less chances of thrombocytopenia. So it is written over here that rarely cause heparin induced thrombocytopenia. That's why it is better to use this LMWH. Okay, so due to their high molecular weight, the high molecular weight heparins do not cross the placenta of human easily, thus are not used anymore. Okay, so the oral coagulants, and the main drug is the warfarin. So the oral anticoagulants, they are the antagonist of the vitamin K that prevent the gamma carboxylation of the glutamic acid residues at many locations at the amino terminal and of coagulation factors. So if you remember the reaction which we have studied in vitamin K, same reaction is there. They just prevent this gamma carboxylation reaction. Okay, so the first use oral anticoagulant was bis hydroxycumaren, and later several other congeners were synthesized that are termed as coumarin derivatives. Okay, so coumarin derivatives, let's start with them. So these derivatives show anticoagulant activity only in vivo, that is in vitro there is no activity shown by them, that is outside the body. So they directly inhibit synthesis of vitamin K dependent clotting factors in liver. So they decrease availability of vitamin K and results in its deficiency. So you can correlate it with that of the thing that we have studied in vitamin K, that in excess or overdoses of the oral anticoagulants we have to use the vitamin K. Okay, so that's how they cause this vitamin K deficiency. Okay, that's why we have to use vitamin K as an antidote in the overdosage of the oral anticoagulants. So the examples of coumarin derivatives, that is bis hydroxycoumarin, we have second, that is warfarin sodium, and we have acinocoumarin. Okay, mechanism of action, these drugs act as competitive antagonist of the vitamin K. Very important. It is one line make of action of this. They inhibit synthesis of the factors, that is prothrombin. Then uh, this is 7th, 9th, 10th, and the protein C and S. For these coagulation factors, the gamma carboxylation reaction is essential, and which is facilitated by the vitamin K. So the coumarin derivatives, they prevent regeneration of vitamin K from its epoxide derivatives in vitro, and thus causes vitamin K deficiency. Okay, so this is the reaction. You can see this is decarboxyprothrombin, and also the factors, that is 7, 9 and 10, and which leads to, when this carboxylation happens, we get actual the activated factors or the factors which actually promote the coagulation, and it is done in presence of vitamin K hydroxyquinone, which is its reduced form to its oxidized form. Okay, so this epoxide reductase, what it does, it converts the epoxide form to the its active form, that is hydroxyquinone form, hydroquinone form, not hydroxyquinone, hydroquinone form. And this conversion of epoxide to hydroquinone form in presence of epoxide reductase enzyme, it is inhibited by the oral anticoagulants. Okay, and hence the vitamin K active form is not available for carrying out the carboxylation reaction of the prothrombin and the other coagulation factors, and thus they act as anticoagulant agents. Okay, so they inhibit regeneration of the active vitamin K hydroquinone, which is a reduced form of vitamin K. This reduced vitamin K is oxidized to vitamin K epoxide, that is inactive form, and this reaction is coupled with protein carboxylation, by which descarboxyprothrombin, that is DCP, is converted to prothrombin by carboxylation of the glutamate residue. By the reactions of the enzyme, vitamin K hydroquinone is regenerated from the vitamin K epoxide using NADH as a cofactor. Synthesis of the clotting factor, it reduces in 2 to 4 hours, and the effect of anticoagulant lasts for 1 day if the synthesis of clotting factor decreases by 40 to 50%. So the pharmacokinetics, coumarin derivatives are well absorbed when given through oral, intramuscular and rectal route. Peak plasma level is obtained within 2 to 8 hours after oral administration. They are 90 to 99% bound to the plasma protein. It is very important because of this property it has many drug interactions, and to which protein it binds to, that is albumin. So sensitivity towards anticoagulant, it differs from patient to patient, therefore individual dose adjustment is required. Adjustment of dose are done to retain the prothrombin time between 1.5 to 2 times and an international normalized ratio, that is INR, of 2 to 3 times of the control. Okay. So therapeutic uses, warfarin is used as an anticoagulant in patients of pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis, that is DVT, which is more common in the pregnant woman, then atrial fibrillation to inhibit thromboembolism, then prosthetic valves, then primary pulmonary hypertension, and sometimes in cerebrovascular disease. Okay. So adverse effect, the most severe risk factor with oral anticoagulant therapy is hemorrhage in any organ, which further results in hematomas and anemia. Alopecia, fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, hypersensitivity reaction, priapism, then skin reactions. These are the some other side effects. During pregnancy, warfarin causes teratogenicity, so it should be avoided. Okay, so when given in first trimester, it can cause fetal warfarin syndrome with bone stippling and the abnormalities of the face and CNS. It causes neonatal hypoprothrombinemia in second and third trimester, so it should be avoided. Okay, so patients with bleeding should not be given warfarin. So patients with hemorrhagic blood disorder, peptic ulcer, severe wounds, bacterial endocarditis, warfarin should be used very carefully. So next drug we have, that is indandione derivatives. In that example is phenandione, and the mechanism of action of it is that it acts by inhibiting vitamin K reductase enzyme, which causes depletion of reduced form of vitamin K, which is its active form. So vitamin K, it acts as cofactor for the carboxylation of glutamate remains on the N terminal, that is the amino terminal regions of the vitamin K dependent proteins, and therefore reduced levels of the vitamin K, it limits the gamma carboxylation and subsequent activation of vitamin K dependent coagulant proteins. Okay, so if you see, they have the similar action as that of the coumarin derivatives. Okay, so the phenandione, it prevents formation of vitamin K dependent coagulation factor, which include factor 2, factor 7, factor 9 and factor 10, as well as the anticoagulant proteins like the C and S. Depression of 3 vitamin K dependent coagulation factor, that is 2, 7 and 10, it causes a reduction in the prothrombin levels and in the amount of thrombin generated and bound to the fibrin. Okay, so the therapeutic uses, the phenandione is used for treatment of pulmonary embolism, cardiomyopathy, atrial fibrillation and flutter, cerebral embolism, mural thrombosis. Mural means which happens in the wall. Okay, thrombosis which happens in the wall of an organ. Then thrombophilia, it is also used for anticoagulant prophylaxis. So the adverse effect, it gives rise to reddish purple swollen patches on skin, then feeling of sickness, red or brown colored urine, severe stomach pain or back pain, difficulty in breathing, chest pain, numbness, black or red stools, consciousness, slurred speech, bleeding cuts or wounds. Okay, so that was all for the topic, that is coagulants and anticoagulants. I know the topic I have covered in one lecture only, and it is quite lengthy, but if you read it thoroughly, or if you have paid very close attention to the things which I have just told you, it is very easy topic, nothing in there. You have to remember only one reaction, and that reaction is promoted by the coagulants, and that reaction is prevented or inhibited by the anticoagulants. That's it. Okay, the therapeutic uses and all, they are quite common. Anticoagulants, they have like same therapeutic uses, and the coagulants, they have same therapeutic uses. Okay, so only there are many drugs there under, but it is quite easier topic. Okay, so that was all from my side, and with this I will conclude with this lecture. Okay, thank you.